story. So I started everything. I should probably put on a black shirt. Is this one too crazy? Let me tell you, are we live?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm up in LA for some business. I'm there with my wife. We're walking across, and I see a this brand,
Uh-huh.
right? So
Yep.
do you know what that brand is? Do you
Yeah.
recognize it?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's an Asics shoe and what have you.
Well, originally, so it's not Asics. The Tiger brand, Bruce Lee wore these
Right.
like in the 60s.
Yes.
It's a handmade brand out of Japan, and
Yeah.
they opened up a store up in Beverly Hills, and I was there, and I'm 61 years old now, man. I'm walking back to my car, and I see like Tiger, and I see the shoes, and immediately I flash back to 15 years old,
Yep.
studying Bruce Lee, working with his kicks and everything. And my wife, we're walking, and I go, I got to go in here. She goes, what is it? I go, this is like from my childhood. It's a flashback.
Mhm.
I went in. I should show you her shoes. They're out there. They were sold out in the original ones that Bruce used to train in.
Right.
They were all sold out of my size. She ends up getting them. So, but I got the T-shirt. They had a tie dye, and I got it. And I thought it'd be cool to talk about because it's like, this is like 50 years ago.
Right.
Like my influence, your influence, like Bruce Lee, duh. And these are the shoes he used to wear. So
Yeah.
he probably didn't have a tie dye shirt on, but anyways,
Probably not. But yeah, but I was sure at some point we would talk about your origin story, let's call it, because on your bio is that Jenny sent me. And by the way, give Jenny a raise or something. She has been extremely helpful.
yeah, anyone that survives the chaos. We are so busy, man.
Yeah.
We have a military division, a law enforcement division, the self defense trainers division, the general public division, then the high gear.
Right.
And she's like air traffic control and dispatch. Like,
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's great.
So see, because there's so many directions that I can go in talking to you. Let's do high gear,
Sure.
right? So I couldn't put my hands on it, but have you ever seen? It's in one of Dan Inosanto's books. Have you ever seen Bruce Lee's drawings for his ideas on sparring equipment that was head to toe?
I must. My brain goes, I must. I mean, there must be sketches of it in the Tao Jeet Kune somewhere.
No, I don't know. I don't think it's in the Tao. I think Inosanto has a book called A Guide to Martial Arts Training with Equipment. Right? And so there's a sketch of it. I couldn't find. I got such a mess here. I couldn't find the book. But I remember the first time I saw your high gear.
Right. It reminded you of that.
I immediately thought of that. So I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you think that Bruce Lee might have gone in that kind of direction?
Meaning designing equipment?
I mean, okay, let me backtrack. Because I saw this interesting discussion. So we could say that we have, like you just talked about, there's the military group, there's the law enforcement group, there's the general public group, there's probably the high powered executive group, and what have you. So we have the martial art group, right? We have martial artists. Then we have the self-defense group. Then we have the combat sports people, right? So my question essentially is, have you ever thought, what direction might Bruce Lee have gone in?
I think that, in the last 10 years, the whole idea of hiring mentors and influencers and celebrities, back in the late 60s, early 70s, when Bruce's fame was peaking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was he charging $400 for a private lesson or something. I forget if it was 250 or 400 or some
Yeah.
outrageous number for back then, right? For back then, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
So, but only like celebrities like, Steve McQueen or James Coburn or like somebody who's an A-list celebrity could afford that.
Right.
Imagine if Bruce Lee were alive now as Bruce Lee, how many people would be hiring him to come talk at their keynote,
Yes.
to come talk at. So, his insights in, I mean, who knows, man? I mean, he's an icon, and we can only imagine, that the speed of his brain and the way he was so far ahead of everyone else back then, that if he had access to the internet and AutoCAD and Instagram and Reels, like what kind of stuff would he be coming up with? So there's no doubt that in the same way, and I got some very opinionated things about like SWAT cops and Tier 1 and cops hiring martial artists to teach them defensive tactics. There's a lot of flaws to that. And there's a lot of ways to explain the flaws, but as you know, I've got more than my share of haters, and I'm happy to explain why it doesn't work if people are open-minded enough to listen, and not confuse that with me saying that doesn't work. That's not what I'm saying. You can learn like badminton, but it doesn't mean that you can play tennis just because you're hitting a racket and a birdie. Like the whole dynamic is different. But having said that, and we'll come back to that, Bruce, because he was a great artist, because he was sparring, at some point, like the way I design high gear, one of my students was a black belt from another school who came over, started training with us, fell in love with our approach. And we were doing, like, before Fight Club was even a movie, we were doing Fight Club-esque stuff. Like every month we'd get together and beat the holy crap out of each other. And we'd videotape this on VHS. Dwight, I know you know what VHS is, but maybe some of the younger people following you are having to Google, what the hell's VHS? What is that? Is that like a sexually transmitted disease or something? Right? So VHS back in the 80s, and one of my students in like 1988, this guy Dan says, because we were using, remember I grew up in Canada, I'm in the States now, but I grew up in Canada, so we were wearing hockey gauntlets, hockey helmet, a taekwondo, like bamboo slat chest guard, baseball shin guards, Bruce Lee, Kempo gloves, and we were just, putting on basketball elbow pads, and it was like a Frankenstein suit. And one of my guys, Dan, says to me one day, he says, because things were really picking up. It was 1988, so it was 2 years after I did Panther Production, did our series on the panic attack, the drill that I designed in the 80s. I had already become really good friends with Brandon, been to Hong Kong, worked on Legacy of Rage with him. He'd come to Montreal, secretly come to Montreal to do some training. So things were really getting some momentum on our approach. And Dan says, we should have our own gear. We should make our own equipment. And I'm like just sitting at the desk. And I'm like, as soon as he planted that seed, I started sketching shit and started doing. And you made me think of that when you said, the Bruce Lee sketch. I'm trying to remember it, and I'll go look for it after. But I just started sketching, what, and Redman was already out and Fist was already out. And if you look at my high gear, the bob over my right shoulder or my left shoulder, in my left shoulder, it's reversed. He's wearing the chest guard, the helmet, the helmet is around the same size as a head. We specifically designed it to be less than 10 pounds. So it didn't infringe on how you moved, grappling, striking, kicking, running. We wanted people to be able to experience the dynamic movement and also the risk reward for doing a real scenario. The problem I had with Redman and Fist was that it was too bulky. So you couldn't grapple, you couldn't really kick.
Yeah.
I was, by that time, by 1993, I was doing almost full-time training law enforcement. So, the official closure of a confrontation was hands behind your back, handcuffed. Well, you couldn't do that in red man or fist gear. So we built that all into high gear. It took me 5 years to design it, multiple
Right.
prototypes.
And how many versions have you gone through so far?
So it took us 5 years to get a working model.
Yeah.
So we haven't had to change it because I spent so long in prototyping.
Okay.
But
Okay.
we've done 2 or 3 upgrades since
Right.
then. It's still state of the art. There's a couple of copies. There's a rip off from a former employee, and then there's a couple of people that reverse engineered it. If you're watching this show, support the creator. Don't buy the rip off. And but you can listen. It's a good suit because it's a copy of mine.
Yeah.
It's just,
Right. Yeah.
people go, "Hey, what's the difference?" I go, "It's still a good suit." The guy,
Yeah.
the guy took my pattern, took my design, used to work for me. And we don't need to get into the bullshit. People know the truth. People know the story. But it hasn't had to change that much. We
Okay.
made little improvements, but it was so well thought out from the beginning. And you don't want it high tech. You don't want, like, I've had people approach me with different types of foams, cooling
Right.
foam. There's a really expensive foam out of the UK that when you strike it, at the point of impact, it actually hardens, so it protects the area getting struck.
Yeah.
So they'll take it. I think it's called 3DO or something. I forget the name now. But
Okay.
like if you put it down and you slam a hammer on it, and you've got something under it, like it won't transfer the energy through it,
Right.
and it's very expensive. It's pretty
Yeah.
heavy,
Yeah.
but I looked at it, I said, like, the coolest part of my high gear suit is the fact that if I put the chest guard on and I come towards you and you jam a front kick into my gut, it's going to make me go, well, good shot. I don't want to not feel it.
Right.
Right. And so
Right.
we originally, the psychology and philosophy of the gear, and it's a funny story. It had to be what we called impact reduction.
Mhm.
I wanted you to know that if I headbutt you with the gear, if I hit you with a body shot, you knew where you were hit and you knew that you were hit.
Yes.
That was the problem with the other suits. So, why have some sort of foam in there that takes that kind of biofeedback away?
Yeah.
I need my role players to know when they were hit so they could feign the appropriate response. And then if we were sparring, if we were just doing like a stick fighting or just doing like a stress inoculating, what would we like to have like 2-on-2, a gang fight, 4-on-1?
Mhm.
You can't experience what that's like if the 4 guys attacking you have no fear of anything you throw at them because the gear is going to protect them.
Right. Right.
Very
Yeah.
subtle. And people who don't do contact and haven't experienced contact can't appreciate that.
Yeah. That's really interesting because now I'm thinking about the fact that at the Kali Academy, at Inosano's Kali Academy, they would spar, especially the weapon sparring, and they'd have the fencing headgear and the hockey gloves and the same baseball shin pads, and it was the same kind of setup, and but nobody ever had the thought of developing anything, right? That would be that would be their property. But that group that you said when Dan said we should design our own gear in 1988 or so, 86 or whatever, where were you ever like a regular martial arts student and then became like a regular martial arts instructor?
Oh, you know, it's a funny question. It's a good question, interesting question, and I love it because no one's ever asked me that before. And I've been in, like, I don't know how many 100 podcasts I've been on or how many magazine interviews. So good one, Dwight.
Hey.
I wrestled competitively as a kid. Started when I was 7. Wrestled for years.
Okay.
Loved it, hated it. I was a good athlete, but I was just afraid of competing all the time, even in baseball, football, gymnastics, wrestling, skiing. I was like an elite skier. I grew up, started skiing when I was 3. I was always afraid of competition, but I was one of the best skiers out there, to the point that like people actually thought if I continued on this trajectory, maybe I go to the Olympics one day if I keep getting better. I was like in that quota.
Yeah.
But I was so afraid of letting down my team, letting down my parents, letting down myself that, and it's like, you know, when I was standing there, and it's one of the reasons I've spent decades studying the psychology of fear, not the physiology of fear, and developed a really practical approach to managing fear, to the point now that I coach entrepreneurs and business leaders and pro fighters and pro athletes on just resilience and mindset.
Yeah.
We've got a doctor on our team, a psychologist who uses this research to help vets with PTSD. It's amazing how big it's gotten, Dwight, since we met and what it's grown into.
Yeah.
But back to your question, was I ever a regular martial artist? You know, not to be corny, I'm 61. I'm still a regular martial artist. Everything, you know, like this morning I went for my walk. This morning I teach live every week on Zoom. You asked me what's my garage. If people can see, I'll zoom out here. They can't really see it. I'll pan, but
Yeah,
like there's all whiteboards and all notes.
There's that whiteboard.
There's whiteboards in the back, bob dummies, striking equipment. You know, if I spin all the way around, I mean, it's a whole gym in my garage here.
Yeah.
And I teach 5 days a week out of here, do live courses, do online courses, because a lot of people can't afford to get to me. And I'm not talking about my pricing. It's just lockdown, COVID, geography, even pre that. So that's, you know, I got a whole office on the other side there, and most of our work is done abroad, law enforcement, military. But going back, I'm full circle to I was saying I was on my walk this morning, and I walk before every class, and I warm up and I think about what I'm going to teach, and I stop. There's a trail. I'm up at the top of the hill, man, and I'm at the top of the hill, and I'm up there going like this, you know, extending my punch, hooking a guy, you know, coming up, dropping stuff in there, like moving slowly, like thinking like a martial artist. But it's not what I'm teaching the guys. It's just me. I'm still a martial artist.
Okay.
I'm still trying to understand how to move efficiently, effectively, tactically. I don't like the idea that I'm 61. That freaks me out. How old are you, buddy?
Yeah. So keep going.
Yeah. Right. But it's like,
I'm ageless.
We remember when we were 20 and 30 and 40, and
Just barely.
I can still move, you know, and I know that if I had to protect myself and my family, I can move, but I'm aware of this timeline and this, like, you know, this shit that's going on, this aging factor. So I try to move every day. But this morning, you know, I'm working and I'm doing the same slow, methodical visualization stuff that I did when I was 20, when I was 21. I used to stand there and visualize stuff, and I'd move slowly. And okay, I hit him here. He comes under here, nail him with a straight punch there, grab him, gouge his eyes, drop an elbow here, you know, and I'm visualizing all this shit. And people are looking at me going, you know, I better call the police. This guy looks fucking insane, right? But so that's more of the metaphysical answer. You know, was I ever a regular martial artist? I am a regular martial artist, but I just had some very, very big vision. When I was 20, I got asked, and you probably heard this story, maybe not. I was asked what I want to do. I want to make the world safer. I abhor violence. The reason my system is so holistic is because I'm afraid of fighting. And I had to study fear, and I had to study natural movement, and I had to study violence. What allowed me to shape the system was this fear of violence. So I would look at people. I didn't want to look at the unicorns as much as I was inspired by Bruce Lee or Ali or Sugar Ray Leonard or Tyson. I look at them as the unicorns of movement. We can be inspired by them, but what was really interesting to me was watching eyewitness, like CCTV, body cam, helmet cam, like smartphone surveillance of fights. And I went, like, nobody looks cool in a fight. Everyone's scrambling. Everyone looks afraid. If it was true violence, and I separate douchebag fights or gang violence from that. If it was like mano a mano, where, if you and I get outside of our cars, go fuck you, square off, and fight each other, that's not self-defense. That's a different type of violence. But having said that, my original martial art was Taekwondo. It was the only school open near me. I got jumped when I was 12 by two guys. I wasn't hurt, but I was scared and intimidated. And it was kind of like a welcome to high school, thing. I was walking and these guys said, "Hey, you go here." And it's like, yeah, I was leaving the elementary school. They go, "When are you going to high school?" "Oh, next year up there." "Yeah." And they grabbed me and fucking hit me. And, and I went home and I wasn't hurt other than emotionally. And I said to my dad, and I had no marks on my face. I go, "Hey, I just got beaten up by two guys." And he's like, "Was it a pillow fight?" Like right. And he said, "Well, you got to learn it." They said, like, and I said, "Is this going to happen to me in high school every day? Am I going to get beaten up?" And he said, "Well, we got to get you some self-defense lessons." And there was only one school open near me. Right. It was just starting the Bruce Lee revolution.
Yeah.
I knew of Bruce, of course, from I was glued to the TV watching the Green Hornet.
Right.
But my first start was Taekwondo. I did that relentlessly till I was 16. I worked out every day, 7 days a week. My basement looked like this, as a kid.
Yeah. See, so that's what I was alluding to earlier. So your dad says, we got to get you some self-defense lessons, and puts you in a Taekwondo school, right? Today, nobody. Well, let me ask you: do people still think that way?
That Taekwondo is self-defense?
Yeah.
You made me say it. You're like, let's see if he knows what I'm talking about. I think this is an interesting time to talk about echo chambers, right? And you look at everything going on with government overreach, with the vaccine, with the lock, whatever you believe in. There's so much division. It almost reminds me of like in the 70s and 80s and 90s, like martial arts fighting over which art is best.
Yeah.
And that probably still hasn't changed. I've separated myself a lot from that. But because of the expansion of reality-based self-defense, which I think is the dumbest acronym I've ever heard. Sorry, anyone who has RBSD tattooed on them, but reality-based self-defense. What other type of self-defense should there be?
Right.
Unreality-based self-defense. Sorry, everybody, don't hate me. Hate the bad guys.
Yeah.
So I think there are people who think Taekwondo is self-defense, but I also think there are people who think that Jeet Kune is, that boxing is, that MMA is. Now, before everyone on the Jeet Kune thread starts throwing daggers at me through the fucking TV, I did a talk 2-3 years ago, maybe 4, and you should Google it, Tony Blauer, the categories. And I define this, and I'll share it with you guys live right here. I'll encapsulate this. Category 1, and the categories are just blocks of training models. Category 1, all traditional classical martial arts. Right. Shotokan, Kempo, Judo, like any traditional martial art. Very ritualized, uniforms, progressions. Then category 2, combat sports. Sambo, jiu-jitsu, Thai boxing, kickboxing, whatever you want. Category 3, RBSD, reality-based self-defense, Krav Maga, and all the other arts. Each one of those trains their practitioners through what's called block-based training. I can't sign up at your school and come to the secret Friday night advanced sparring class. You go, "Hey, Tony, you're not, that's the class. You can't get into the secret class. You got to prove yourself. You got to go through this. Dude, you don't even know how to fucking stand like this. You don't even know what a straight punch is. You don't know how to make a fist. You don't know how to get your knees together and do this movement. Do this form, prove yourself. And even though you might be saying, look, a guy grabs you, you're going to intercept, you're going to fox down, straight punch, straight blast the guy. And even though it works in the street, it's still taught by block-based training. Now, if everyone listening here, we got a bunch of people on the side there. I'm too far away and I'm 61. I can't read their comments anyways. Bullshit, whatever they're saying. Is I have done studying for decades on the neuroscience of learning. And the intuitions that I had studying violence in the 80s and doing force on force training before Fight Club was a movie, before wax on, wax off was an expression. In the 80s, we did for 13 years, 1980 to 1993, before I closed my school, we would do all these scenarios based on, we'd reverse engineer them based on an event that we heard. Right. We'd film them and analyze them. And I would tell my students, don't try to win these. Let's experience them. Let's analyze them. And let's do it again and see what happens. And we always included an emotional, psychological distraction. So I could totally, for example, Dwight, if you put both hands up in front of the screen like this, like you're talking me down, call our you remember this, our negotiators.
Yeah.
When I stand up, palm strike me. Carefully, don't break your mic. I'm going to stand up from my chair. When I stand up, just palm strike towards me. I'm going, hey, fuck you, Dwight. I'm coming towards you. Fire, hit me with a palm strike. Boom. Nice. Now, get ready to do it again. So you know the drill. When I stand up, hit me. As soon as I stand up, hit me with the palm strike. I stand up, bang, you nail me. Your reaction time's faster. Let's do it again. Now watch this, okay? You're in position, get ready to move. And before we start the drill, I just want you to tell me and tell your audience, which is your dominant hand, your left hand or your right hand?
My right hand.
What happened when I got you talking? I tripled your reaction time. Did you notice as you started to talk, you realized I was standing, your brain hiccuped for a second, and then you threw a right palm strike.
Yeah.
But had that been an attack, had I been moving, I totally changed your reaction time by getting you to talk or think. So I started to discover all of these things doing scenarios where if you think about it, I go to your school and I go, hey, let's do multiple assailant sparring tonight. And you go, okay, you 3 guys against you 2 guys. We'd put on 16-ounce gloves, mouth guards, head glove. We'd tap, and then we'd stand around and we'd move, and we'd beat the shit out of each other. And we would accidentally go, oh, that's from multiple assailant training. Really what it was a part of learning about it, but it was missing the most important area: stress inoculation, pre-contact cues, managing fear, verbal de-escalation, talking to yourself, oh fuck, and talking to somebody else, hey man, I don't want any trouble, and all these things. Now, I'm all over the place. Let me pull myself back in. The categories. When you learn any martial art, if I went to every single martial art in the yellow pages and I called them up, I said, if I train in your martial art, will I be able to defend myself? Every single one of them, nobody's going to say no. They're all going to say yes, of course. Because when you get to the highest level, that's what you're visualizing. And here's the thing. If I say to us, particularly a guy, if I say, tell me what happens in a future fight. You get into a future fight. What's going on? Every guy on this call and everyone listening is visualizing them punching somebody, them uppercutting somebody, straight blasting somebody, side kicking somebody. Nobody's visualizing hiding while 3 guys with guns are tearing up your house in a home invasion. Nobody's visualizing their car breaking down in some fucking shitty part of town and then a car pulling up and you going, oh, fuck, trying to start your car. Nobody's visualizing the pre-contact or the pre-fight element. Guys visualize like the John Wick element.
Right.
We visualize the, boards don't hit back and blasting somebody, right? And it's just what we do. It's our ego. It's our pride. And so coming back to the categories, because if those of you who are listening to this, if you truly understand this, it will make you safer. Category 1, every martial art is taught by block-based training. You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and you can get exposed to this. Right. Category 2, all MMA, boxing, contact, it's the same thing. You know, like a shitty gym will take you on your day one and throw you in the ring with somebody who's been there for 4 years. And that happens. And you got brain damage or broken nose, right? Hey, dude, you don't even know how to throw a punch or slip a punch. You're not getting in the ring yet. Like a good trainer will build you. In the same way, when you say, hey, coach, I want to fight, they don't give you somebody who's had 50 fights. They give you somebody that's had 5 fights if it's your first fight, or 1 fight, or 0 fights too. But you're still learning jab, 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 cross. You're still learning basics, fundamentals, and layering it, called block-based training. Same thing with Krav Maga, same thing with any RBSD.
Right.
Now, here's the problem. In all of those systems, I'm going to get really trippy for a second, very metaphysical, but also neuroscience. What I've been studying for 30 plus years is the neurobiology of fear. Now, everyone listen carefully. I do a lecture to military and law enforcement groups called Violence Loves Speed. Let's talk about the physics of violence. All fights are dangerous, but the most dangerous fight is an ambush. Who's the ambush in a real violent encounter? You or the bad guy? It's always the bad guy. Like if you're a good Samaritan, if you're a good person, you're not ambushing people.
Right.
You're getting money out of the ATM machine. You're walking down the street. You're the good Samaritan going, come on, guys, let's not do this. And then all of a sudden, a knife comes out, a gun comes out, a punch comes out. So violence loves speed. The neurobiology of fear does 2 things. And this confuses a lot of people who either selectively listen to me through an ego filter, an unconscious bias filter, or they misunderstand this. I don't care if you're a tier 1 operator in a military group. If a stimulus is introduced too quickly, you will flinch. It will create a startle in the brain. It will create a flinch in the body. Even if you've been in gunfights and knife fights, and I train these guys, they get it. And so when I talk about the neurobiology of fear, 2 things happen. One, if I go, whap, and I'm on you, and I come across, like, you know, we're talking, and all of a sudden you go, hey, man, let's, and I jump across the table, you're not doing wax on, wax off. If you're truly in a de-escalation mode going, seriously, we're fighting, you need to recalibrate in a sudden ambush. But what we know is this, and this is neuroscience, executive function is hijacked. You can't access your complex motor skills right away, which is why you see people doing shit like this. They're covering their head. So I figured out in the 80s how to weaponize the startle flinch. The startle flinch deploys like an airbag in a car. Here's a wonderful metaphor. I think you'll dig this, and hopefully your audience does too. Do you drive, Dwight?
Yeah.
Are you a good driver?
I would think I am.
Yeah, everyone thinks they are, but you're a good driver because you're a good athlete. You've been training your whole life. You're a good fucking driver. You're better than most drivers because you're a good athlete. You got good situational awareness. True. You got good situational awareness. So to be a really good driver, you need to understand how to drive, and you have to have good situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Every good driver I know has been in a car accident.
Right.
Have you been in a car accident?
Not in like 10 years, but yes.
Yeah. And it was probably, hopefully, we don't have to talk about it, the other guy's fault. In other words, and this is the metaphor, a drunk driver, somebody falls asleep at the wheel, somebody's texting, road rage. Mm-hmm. Now, everyone listen to this metaphor, pay attention. It's so cool. I think it's cool. You're driving, you're a good fucking driver. In this metaphor, the car is your body. You're in really good shape. You're aerobically fit. You're agile. You're smooth. You're fast. You're a really good driver. Your car's your body, your mind, your strategies, your decision making. You understand the law. That's all this. It's your navigation system. And you're sitting at a light, head on a swivel, looking for assholes. And all of a sudden, whap, somebody smashes into the car. Yeah. And they smash into the car at such a speed that your steering wheel is going to fuck you up. But you're in a modern car. What saves your life? The airbag.
Yeah.
So the airbag deploys without you say, imagine if in car accidents we had to say airbag deploy.
Right.
I make this joke that nobody on this call ever says, wow, this is happening really fast, I should flinch. Right? You've flinched 1,000 times in your life. You're walking somewhere, there's a snake. Fuck! You just walk in somewhere, there's a spider. Shit, you're not ready. So you tell somebody, hey, throw a kick to my body, and they lose control and they kick you in the face, and you go, dude, and the hands come up. You go, I said body because you're choreographing something.
Right.
If all of you think about the times you've actually flinched, you've never thought. So flinching happens at a non-conscious level. It's faster than cognition. So we go back to violence loves speed, the bad guy's violence in a real, true violent encounter. How do we match that? We can't defeat that with complex motor skills because there will always be a micro flinch when we're surprised. So this was the insight I had in 1987, 88, when I developed the whole SPEAR system, spontaneous protection, enabling accelerated response. How do I weaponize the startle flinch? Now, let me go back to the 4 categories. Category 1, and this is really important, and here's a good book, which is a good foundational book for everybody. Get the book called The Talent Code, and you'll understand this neuroscience better than I could explain it. When you do any type of striking over and over again, any type of kicking, what you're doing is you're myelinating the neuron. What's that doing is the myelin sheath is wrapping, and it improves signal speed. When you see a stimulus and your eyes pick up a pattern, and it sends a message to your brain, and then it downloads and deploys that message. So there's no true muscle memory. Your muscles don't just fucking do what they want. You have to have awareness. You're not going to do something if you don't see a punch come in and your hands aren't ready. Yeah. So if you're doing up your gloves and I punch you, I'm probably going to hit you in the face because dude, I thought we were starting in a minute, right? So category 1, all martial arts, what we do is we create an unconscious bias for neural patterns. If I say to a guy who's been doing jiu-jitsu for 4 years, guy pushes you and then he throws a punch, what are you going to do? Is the jiu-jitsu guy going to go, that's easy, when I lose my balance backwards, I'm going to step back and side kick him? No, the jiu-jitsu guy has an unconscious bias to get under the guy, take him to the ground, choke him out, mount him.
Right.
If I say to a taekwondo guy shoves you and says, you want to fight, and you fall back and you're here, is the taekwondo guy going to go, no problem, fucking clinch him and fucking knee him to the body? No, that's what the Thai guy is thinking. Right. Are you tracking?
Yeah.
So when we train, when we fall in love with our martial art, we actually create an unconscious bias to try to insert the moves that we love to do.
Yeah.
And this is happening at an unconscious level. This is so subtle, and we see it all over. That was what I said about in the beginning. If you're a law enforcement, if you're security, if you're a husband, wife, trying to get your kids to safety, you might have somebody throw a punch at you and you double leg him, take him to the ground, and then doors open and his buddies get out of the back of the car in a road rage. But you didn't do the safest thing because your situational awareness was compromised by your desire to take the guy down. That happens in category 1, 2, 3 training. If you're doing any type of combat sport, if I ask a boxer, guy's in front of you, he shoves you, the boxer's going, well, whack, I'm going to hit him with a body shot, hit him with an uppercut. The boxer's not going to go, I'm going to shin kick him.
Right.
So everyone listening, I say this with utmost respect. I'm a lifelong martial artist. I've studied this stuff, and I studied violence, fear, and aggression for 40 years. And I've looked at all these people, and I just answered something in my form the other day. I posted a meme. I said, don't confuse technical with tactical.
I'm going to get to that.
Right. Yeah. So a guy last night messaged me. He said, isn't there a link between technique and tactics? Don't you need technique in order to be tactical? And I said, you would think so, but it's not true, because there are thousands of people who defend themselves every day who've never studied martial art. If they needed technique, they'd never be able to defend themselves. How did they defend themselves? They defended themselves through sheer will and indignation and saying, fuck no, I'm not going to be a victim today. And so they're just grabbing on, fucking throwing shit, fighting, gout, hair pulling, and they're fighting like our ancestors fight. Just get the fuck off me, throwing shit, screaming.
That's what Bruce Lee called the primitive stage.
And he was right on the money.
Yeah. The primitive stage.
Anyway.
So then Bruce Lee said that you go through the mechanical stage. I think that's what you're talking about. Because do you know what I'm talking about? He says the second stage is the mechanical stage. And essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, he says that's where you fall in love with your art.
Yeah,
right?
he was a smart dude.
Yeah, and he says, and you can even, he says, you become mechanically bound and intellectually bound.
Well, and beautiful. And so this is, remember his little grave that he had in his office in memory of a once fluid man, crammed and
Right.
distorted by the classical mess.
Yeah.
So what Bruce didn't have the language for, because it didn't exist, and it didn't exist in the 80s when I was doing this.
Right.
This is only 20 years old and mostly 10 years old. Myelinization of neuron, that language didn't exist.
I have never heard that term before.
Right? The myelin sheath, signal-based training, deep practice. This is all new neuroscience, man. So
Yeah.
if Bruce was alive right now, he and I'd be friggin' riffing off of this stuff. And he'd be going, because why? He would now have scientific language to explain his insights of in memory of the once fluid man crammed and distorted by the classical mess. What's actually happening there isn't somebody going, whose kung fu is better than mine, or who can do karate better than Japanese? Like, you know, the line out of which movie was that? Way of the Dragon.
Is it? Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And what's happening is this.
A line said by a Korean guy.
Right. If you're a sushi chef, man, and you love sushi, and I go, man, I'm in the mood for some Oriental food. Can you whip something up? And I meant Szechuan, and you bring me sashimi. I'm like, Dwight, what the fuck's this? You go, dude, you said you wanted food. I go, yeah, but I wanted Szechuan. And you go, well, I'm a sushi chef. What we're doing, what we're talking about is preference. And so what I've done is found through the study of neuroscience actual language that explains, listen, if you got really good at a triangle choke, and I'm sure you've obviously explored an integrated grappling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's moves you get good at.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you do is you lay the trap, you set it up, ankle lock, or arm bar, or triangle. And when you make somebody tap, and everybody on this call knows this, when you make somebody tap, you get a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
When I go here, I get you can't see it here, but this is the filter for my mic. If I'm here like this and I go bam and I nail it with a shot, I can't hit you as hard as I want and bust your nose. If we're sparring, I'm like boom, and if I hit you a little too hard, I'm like, dude, are you okay? You go, dude, take it easy, right? Even if we're boxing, we're pulling shit, even if we go hard. Because if you stun your partner, unless you're an asshole and the guy is wobbled, you're like, dude, sorry, I was right. So we're always like measuring. But in grappling, you don't fake tap somebody out. You don't fake submit somebody. Somebody actually does this and you go, oh yeah, right. Yeah. And so there's a reward for grappling.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is that reward in part is the dopamine in the brain, and we get seduced by the dopamine hit. Yeah. And so when you get really good at whether it's a side kick, a straight blast, and you start to get good at it, two things are happening. And I say this because this is a heavy thing. This is something that I teach like our law enforcement military. Situational awareness is a conscious cognitive skill. You don't have situational awareness when you're asleep. And it's cognitive. So if I say to you, Dwight, I'm going to try and trick you again like I did before, but don't let me trick you. But in order for us to do the drill, just move your mic just off screen for a second. Grab your mic and move it. So while you're doing that, and I can see you going, he's fucking tricking me here. But while you're doing that and not taking your eyes off me, you're actually a little distracted. You're not. I know it's your right hand's your dominant hand. I now got you holding on to something on your right hand. I fucking leap across the table and I hit you. Yeah. In other words, you can put the mic back now. But that was me just distracting you. But what I'm saying is that if I'm here like this and I go and I'm like somebody's bodyguard, and then my team controller says, Tony, check in, and I go, yeah, Blauer here, nothing at my like while I'm doing that. My situational awareness is compromised. So I tell people, you're driving, you're the good driver, your phone goes beep, beep, and then it goes beep, beep, and you just look down for a second. I'm not picking it up. It's dangerous to do, but you took your eyes off the road for a split second. We all do that shit. You turn on the radio. Oh, fuck. You hit the brakes like because somebody slowed down quickly. So I want everyone to realize that if you remember this statement, situational awareness is a conscious cognitive skill. And when we are thinking about our favorite move to do, we aren't thinking about what is the safest thing we can do in a truly violent encounter. So now if we come back to the 4 categories, category 1, all martial arts, category 2, combat sports, category 3, reality-based self-defense, they all have value. There are people in every single one of those categories that could whip my ass in a fight. But then there's category 4. Category 4 is the violent attack. What I figured out in the 80s, Dwight, was I didn't look at other martial arts fighters. I didn't look at how other martial arts attack, because my whole idea was other martial artists don't start fights.
Right.
Bad guys start fights.
Right.
Douchebags start fights. So I only looked at how do predators move? What are they doing? And that led me to the whole startle flinch research, which inspired. So my incubator period in the 80s, I came up with cerebral self-defense, the mental edge that became the No Fear program. I developed the high gear suit after like 10 years of force on force. Then we started to build it. And also after 7 years of scenario-based training, I stumbled across the startle flinch. And how is that, getting in the way of all these attacks? Why was that working?
Right.
And I spent decades studying that. And if people listen carefully, if they get past, I created a maxim years ago: be careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing. And people thought I was criticizing Jeet Kune or criticizing Krav Maga. And what I was talking about was understanding what your brain. Benny Urquidez said this to me in 1980. Right? Benny Urquidez, one of the greatest fighters ever. I'm in at his gym out in California, out there for my first my first Black Belt magazine interview. And I go to Benny's gym. I'm hanging out there, and we're just talking about everything. And he says, what you practice is what you'll do.
Right.
And what he was talking about was what I just explained with big words that make me sound like more intelligent than I actually am, because I memorized some big words, right? What you practice is what you'll do means I create a psychological attraction to a move that makes me feel good, because every time I do it, I'm rewarded by dopamine. And I also create neural patterns. Meaning if I'm standing in front of you and we're fighting and all of a sudden I do this and I lower my center of gravity, if you're a wrestler, you get ready to sprawl. If you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you get ready to sprawl, maybe guillotine, maybe pull guard, right? If you're a Thai fighter, an MMA fighter, you're getting ready to knee the guy, maybe, depending on, if you have a striking bias. So what I want everyone to understand is that these decisions that you make aren't just you thinking and being in a flow state. They're also part of our brain patterns. And that changes everything in a fight 4 scenario. So the category 4 is what I look at only. I look at real video violence. So when we do our scenarios, I don't say, you guys go over here, spar, let me show you move. I show a video of somebody getting their fucking maimed or killed. Yeah. And I go, let's reverse engineer this. What do we need to know to get out of danger here? And it starts with self-awareness and situational awareness, and then it moves to verbal de-escalation, legal, moral, ethical de-escalation, and then we run through 4 iterations of being ambushed, intercepting an ambush, and then jumping the attack if we've got good pre-contact cues.
Okay.
It's very scientific.
Yeah. That's how you get to Bruce Lee's 3rd stage, which he calls, well, people express it variously. In some places, it's called the return to the original freedom. And in other places, they call it the spontaneous stage. Right?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought or been asked what the relationship is there a relationship between what you do and what you know about Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune?
I've never been asked about it. I've had a lot of controversy from some people in Jeet Kune, and I've had a lot of polarization years ago. People saying, "Oh, you're copying Bruce Lee" and stuff like that. You know, if you watch how I move
Right.
and what I do, you don't see any, like if I was ballroom dancing and I said, look, look, this is spear dancing, and I'm doing this here like that, and you go, look, people have been ballroom dancing for hundreds of years. It's exactly the same. You're copying this, but the way we move and the way we do drills doesn't look like anything in how Bruce moved.
Right.
But what's interesting is there's a thing called convergent evolution and universal principles, right? So when you talk about being spontaneous, we talk about the bad guy controls the fight, closest weapon, closest target dictates. Right. That means what is available on you and what is available, and it's not a measurement, right? I could be up here in front of Bob trying to talk him down, and if I'm a Jeet Kune Do guy in Scotland, everyone's going, okay, headbutt the guy, right? But because they love, so that's the unconscious bias. Yes. But what if my favorite move is a headbutt and you're wearing a full face motorcycle helmet and I'm not wearing a helmet? Should I headbutt you? In other words, all of a sudden I'm at more risk because I don't have good situational awareness because I just want to do a move, right? And so we need to be careful with spontaneity when we're evaluating it through a sport model. And I think that's what's very fundamentally different with what we do.
Okay. So you brought that up. So the dopamine hit that you get in grappling, is that why even the sport aspect of jiu-jitsu took off and became so popular?
Well, I mean, jiu-jitsu is fucking very effective. I've been grappling my whole life. I was at the first UFC in 1993, right. Cage side. A lot of people think I knock all this stuff. I don't. It drives me up a wall because I go, no, like these guys are freaking killers. My whole thing is I try to write and say provocative things to make people safer. If you really understand what's under the substance of the subject, but there's a very, very famous school near me called Studio 540. It's a jiu-jitsu school. It's world class. You got the best fighters rolling through town here. My schedule is crazy that I can't train regularly, but I've gone in there and I'm a fucking white belt compared to these guys. I get tapped when I used to go there, I didn't ever, and they all knew who I was, but this was me all night. Right. Yeah. So, but I understood what it was. I'm staring at my gun safe over there. I got knives, I got guns. I'm not, if three guys attack me, I'm not trying to ankle lock somebody, right? I understand the facets of what's a category 4 fight and what are the risks and dangers of category 1, 2, 3. And people again are maybe going, fuck, is he insulting this? I'm saying no. When you talked about, let's go back to the Bruce Lee spontaneous stage. If all you're doing is Wing Chun and American boxing, then all you're spontaneous with is Wing Chun and American boxing.
Right.
If I say to you, here's the situation, what would you do? And your answer was, well, I would attack by deception here. I would get to this angle here. I go, wait a minute. Why aren't you playing dead in this scenario? Why aren't you running away? Why didn't you call 911? Why didn't you de-escalate it? Well, if your art or system doesn't talk about what is the safest thing you could do, what we've broken down as D1, D2, D3. D1 is detect and avoid. D2 is diffuse and de-escalate. And D3 is defend. If push comes to shove, defend.
Right.
And all of that needs to be moral, ethical, legal. Well, most systems only work on D3 solutions. So again, it's the holistic totality of the whole thing.
Yeah. Huh. All right. So refresh my memory again then. In terms of chronology, the first program that you developed was called what?
Like when I first started teaching in like 1980.
Yeah.
So I started teaching in 1977, and I was teaching boxing, wrestling, and taekwondo, right?
Okay.
So it was my intuitive hybrid version of what's evolved into MMA. And I
Right.
didn't invent MMA. Lots of guys were doing that shit. Kempo was doing that, right? Like in Hawaii, he was blending stuff. In 1980, I got hired to teach this 15-year-old kid. I was 20 years old. He lost a fight, a bully fight in school where the kid shoved him. Mitch grabbed him and said, "Don't ever put your hands on me again." It was an emotional moment. He'd been verbally tormented for months. His dad hired me to teach them. There's nothing physical. When the kid shoved him, Mitch reacted and went, "Don't," and grabbed him as another 15-year-old. And the guy dropped him with a left hook. And Mitchell's telling me the story, and I'm going, "Dude, why didn't you fucking slip or parry or do something?" And he goes, "Well, I was holding him with my shirt and I had my school books in my hand." And I looked at him and I was like, "Fuck." And I always tell this story, I go, it was like the god of self-defense hit me in the head with a lightning bolt. And I went, "Oh my God, we teach self-defense wrong." And I'm only 20 years old, but I meant we as a community, we teach self-defense via the sport model of sparring.
Right.
And what I did right away is I said, "Mitch, are those your books?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Grab me and grab him." And then we worked out all the things he could do with books in his hand, holding on a shirt. And from that day forward, every single class, before Simon Sinek came up with "What's Your Why?" Back a decade ago. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember this, 1988, I was in Inside Karate Magazine. The title of the article was "A Word to the Wise," and it was spelled WHYS. Right?
Yeah.
So like back decades ago, that's where my brain was, man. Why are we doing this? Why are we practicing this? Right. And in the 80s, we were doing de-escalation is the big buzzword these days, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you were a student of mine in the 80s, you were learning nonviolent postures, de-escalation. We always talked about the moral, ethical de-escalation. And then if push came to shove, you went. But you always tried to walk and talk your way out of it. In fact, if you have the original Panic Attack series shot in San Clemente by Panther Productions, there were drills in there where I taught it this is 1986, showing verbal assault drills where the student could only be in trouble getting bitch slapped and shoved and had to just take it just to practice. There's times when you shouldn't do anything, even if your martial arts said, "Throw a side kick here."
Right.
How do you exercise that restraint?
Yeah.
When's the time to go? When's the time to not go? So my original martial art in the 80s, I called Chufen, CHUFEN.
Yes.
And if you grew up, you're old enough to know this, but in the 80s, you didn't say confrontation management. You didn't say, tactical this. In the 80s, you needed an Oriental name. So it was just me, and it was just me honoring the heritage. I had a Chinese book, a glossary, and I was looking at names that resonated with my personal philosophy and psychology. And Chu Fen meant to punish. And I liked it because we trained pretty fucking hard. So we were punishing our bodies. And I also wanted my students to be so good that if there was a confrontation and they were in a nonviolent posture going, "Please, I don't want any trouble. Please don't, let's not." That they were so good that the fight was almost like a parent scolding a kid. And I would tell my students that. It's like, "Hey, you're going to your room." It's like it was that level of confidence I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you went from Chufendo to the No Fear program and then to Spear system.
So Chufendo stayed throughout the 80s.
Okay.
around 1985, 86, we were so busy with the force on force scenarios, and the panic attack drill was taking off, and Panther launched it in 1993. It was crazy. When I was at the first UFC, I had fighters stopping me in the hall going, "Oh my God, I have your panic attack tapes." Because we were doing like no holds barred shit in that, right?
Right.
And they're going, "It's because of your videos that I'm actually doing this."
Right.
Right. And it was so cool. Like Zane Frazier, like this is like OG, like UFC 1, right? You know,
Yeah.
some of the comments better be, how old is this guy? Holy shit. But the yeah, so Trufendo stayed there, and the no fear was just a concept, but it started off as cerebral self-defense, because I realized this in the 80s, we'd have people show up like to the seminar. It got really popular. So you could sign up. You didn't have to be a member of the school. You signed a waiver, and then we talked, and it was usually a 1 or 2 day seminar, and we'd do the stuff. And sometimes like there'd be like a 120-pound girl there, and you could see her scared. She was there for cathartic purposes. She was a victim of rape, wanted to like experience this. And then there'd be like some guy with cauliflower ears and a busted nose, and he's posturing, and he'd be the first guy to fucking give up in a scenario. A lot of people are used to sucker punching and sparring, but they don't understand how to de-escalate and avoid. This is a great story. This guy's still a friend of mine. He's actually my insurance salesman to this day still. Larry shows up for one of these seminars. I've never met him before. And so the fights would happen like if they were in my garage. My school was like 40, 50 feet long. We'd have the fights happen at the back. I'd say, hey, you're at a bus stop, you're at a bar. We'd set up a scenario. Role players would come in. A drunk would walk up to you and go, hey, man, what the fuck, man? I'm like, we're just, and you had to act these things out. So just the way I distracted you by talking to you before, I forced people to have conversations so that nobody was standing there ready to spar, because that's just not how shit goes down.
Right.
And so I say to the group, I go, guys, the moment you can break contact, right? So if Bob's one of the guys and you're here like this and you go, oh, fuck, and you just push Bob away and run, as you get to our juice bar at the other end of the hotel, the other end of the school, you're safe. And Larry puts up his hand and he goes, hey, with no disrespect, Mr. Blauer, we all know how to run. I think we came here to learn how to fight. And I stopped the class. I said, I always told this story after I go, the fact that you don't even want to inject running as a form of self-defense tells me that you might let your ego or pride dictate your next move in the street. And that's why you might get shot or stabbed.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that would be your only rep, but I wanted people to experience all of the variables and options so that the brain, the mental blueprint, could store, running is an option.
Yeah.
Gaining fear is an option.
Yeah. A lot of what you've said thus far, because I wanted to ask you about these 3 quotes that Jenny sent me. And the first one is, you can't be brave if you're not afraid.
My favorite.
I think I see, based on everything that you've said, where that one comes from. Right? I mean, because you run as a form of self-defense because you are afraid.
But I also want you running because it's the most strategic thing to do. So if you Google the definition of self-defense, the typical definition, Merriam-Webster, is a physical act of protecting your property or your life.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yeah, probably.
I looked at that several years ago and I went, wow, what a limited definition. Nothing about situational awareness, nothing about de-escalation. The assumption by universal definition is that the fight already happened. Well, that's so fucking limiting. So we create a definition. Hopefully in my lifetime, it'll be the universal standard. And it's the decision to choose safety when danger is imminent. We spent months, the team, going back and forth with language. Listen to how succinct that is. The decision to choose safety when danger is imminent. Is running away could running away be the safest thing if danger is imminent?
Right.
You turn the street and now you're surrounded by an Antifa mob. Should you get out and go, let's go, right? And there's 20 guys with skateboards and helmets on. Should you be fucking running or fighting?
Right.
Well, generically, you should be running, right? You're in an active shooter situation. You're in a club, guy comes in, fucking shoots, kills the person next to you. They fall on you. You're hit in the leg, and the person falls. You can't move. Should you play dead, or should you get up and go, hey, I know you're 20 feet away with a gun, but you didn't kill me, right? Like, how do you think of these things? If you don't even consider them in training, we had a maxim back in the 80s. If you can't think to do it in training, what makes you think you'll think to do it in the street?
Very true. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that quote, you can't be brave if you're not afraid, is one of my favorite lines from the No Fear seminar. FYI, gang, no fear is spelled K-N-O-W. Not like the adrenaline company, No Fear, N-O, which is a great trademark and a great slogan. And I had every one of their shirts as a teenager. But guess what? Because I wanted no fear, but
Right.
it didn't exist.
Right.
And I realized, and it was it's the most empowering thing that I tell people when I'm coaching entrepreneurs and business people and fighters and athletes, and they go, man, I'm so fucking scared about this competition. I go, good. Okay, that's okay. How do we turn that fear into fuel? And there's, of course, a unique process to creating that new relationship, but it starts with this reminder that if I look at the ingredients, if this was a bottle of courage, the number one ingredient is going to be fear. You can't have fear. You can't have courage without fear. And that is why I say you can't be brave if you're not afraid.
Right. And then those, so that ties right in or flows right into those who manage their fear, manage to fight.
Right. And that,
I mean,
and
that would apply to that would apply to the entrepreneur, wouldn't it?
Of course.
Right.
Look how many people committed suicide, depression, drugs, lost their business, gave up in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm not judging because it's been horrific. I almost lost my company. All of my business is live courses.
Mm-hmm.
In the first 6 months of 2 weeks to flatten the curve, most of my business is contract courses, military and law enforcement. You know, we canceled 30 courses in 6 months.
Yeah.
There was hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was sitting there one day, going, 2 weeks, okay, this will be okay. And then all of a sudden, cancellation. And I'm looking around my house, man. I'm like, fuck, I could lose my business, my house. I can't feed my family. And it got like, for 24 hours, I was fucking terrified.
Right. And
then it was like, wait a minute. You know, this fear management guy, you need to fucking set up a session with him. And what would you tell me if I hired you? It was like, dude, you can't be brave if you're not afraid. Those who manage their fear manage to fight. It doesn't guarantee victory, but it guarantees you're in the fight.
Yeah.
And when you start fighting, things start happening. You got to fight back.
Yeah.
And that goes for what we do, teaching people to defend themselves. You know, if you cooperate with a mugger, you get mugged. If you cooperate with a rapist, you get raped. You cooperate with a murderer, you get murdered.
No.
If you're going to be harmed, you got to fight. So you were asking me evolution real quick. Chu Fendo, the first videotape that we launched with, just so people understand lineage, the first videotape number one for Panther Productions, released 1986, was called Cerebral Self-Defense, The Mental Edge. So this wasn't like some like new agey thing that I came up with 5 years ago. This is like 1986.
Right. Like
a formalized system. Then we released audio, 3 audios in the early 90s, metacognition. I forget what the third one was called. Metacognition, cerebral self-defense, and I forget the other one. Mm-hmm. And then in the 90s, 1993, the law enforcement world discovered me. We launched High Gear in 1993. It took 5 years to launch. And when police agencies started to bring me in, I couldn't say you're learning Chu Fan. So what we actually called it was tactical confrontation management systems. and started organizing it, and then eventually it got too long, and now we just call it Blauer Tactical.
Right.
But
but at what point then because when you were here in Miami, you were here doing the Spear system seminar.
Yep.
Right. So at what point did Spear come about, and then did that morph into something else?
Yeah. So Spear, the original inspiration for it happened in like 1986, 87 during my sucker punch drill, where I had one of my good students, a real good boxer, Warren. I said, hey, man, you can ask me questions, and whatever you say to me, I'm going to role play. Mm-hmm. So like if he came up and he's got 16-ounce gloves on, I got a mouth guard, we're recording. And I was really just trying to figure out how close is too close. That was my hypothesis.
Okay.
That if I'm standing here with gloves on and you're standing there and I lunge across the room, I know that you're probably going to be able to make something happen. Maybe get a kick up, maybe get a bong sow across, parry, slip because of distance.
Mm-hmm.
But if suddenly we walk here and I'm like,
right,
whack, and the shot comes like, and now we're like at the bus stop or at a bar or between parked cars. So I was always trying to push the envelope because I wouldn't have my students do anything that I hadn't analyzed myself. So I could say, hey, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Here's why. Right? I want to be able to explain. So it was a quiet. We were alone in the school, cameras rolling, and I understood at this point, like I explained to you earlier, that if there was dialogue changes your reaction time. And so every one of you on this call that is doing self-defense, where you're just saying, okay, hold the knife to my neck, and you're just going, and you're just doing that, that's only part of the equation. And while you think it's important, it's not the most important. It's the emotional, psychological self-control, manipulating your own inner fears, your doubts, your concerns, and also manipulating the behavior of the threat. Because the mind navigates the body before you say, go now, parry, grab, do whatever.
Right.
There's shit going on. In the real fight, it's, hey, don't fucking move or I'll shoot you. Give me your wallet. Don't try and there's all these thoughts. But anyways.
Yeah. So, that thing you said that you were doing this morning, right? So that component of the encounter, can you solo train that through self-talk?
Yeah. And which one was it? Remind me what I said.
Well, so when you said when you were out this morning moving, right?
Yeah.
So what you're talking about there, like the whole de-escalation stuff and whatever, right? I'm just wondering if you don't have somebody with whom to role play, can you do this yourself?
Yeah. So that's the whole thing. Like, I have hundreds of students around the world that train with me on Zoom,
right,
5 days a week.
Okay.
And I'm teaching them all of these solo skills. The hypothesis for the class was, we're all locked down. We need to improve our situational awareness. If the zombies are coming for us, we still need to be able to fight. We can't sit here and get fat. We need to train, but ostensibly we don't have training partners. So I've created,
especially in Australia.
Yeah, it's insane what's going on down there, and I got a lot of friends in Australia.
Yeah.
And we actually have a bunch of clients from Australia doing the training.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of the exercises are solo exercises. Like, for example, one of the drills we were doing this morning was, I was saying, you're sitting here, you're leaning over, you're talking to somebody, and a guy comes up to you and grabs your shoulder and says, hey, outside, you're coming with me. And it's like, how do you talk to the guy here and visualize that he's leaning, he's on your shoulder like this, going, so if I'm sitting down over here and a guy goes here and he goes, hey, motherfucker, remember me? And he's right here. Do you make the mistake of going, get off me, and standing up? Or do you, I guess force parallels dangerous, so don't take this literally, but this was just the exercise in class today, was being here, seeing the target here, and then being able to, using startle flinch conversion, extensor, elasticity, understanding the kinetic chain of spring. So we have this coiled energy that you learn doing the spear. Watch how my elbow's not moving, my hand's not moving. Look how fast the elbow comes off my leg. So imagine if you were right beside me, grabbed my shirt and said, "Get up out of the chair, out of here. Come here. You and I are going outside. We're fighting."
Right.
And I'm here like this, and I go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Wham! And the shot's coming out there. How do you generate that? So we just broke down the eccentric muscle movement, the kinesthetic perception. How do I create the speed? So I tell people, like, imagine if you turned your head here and there's a fucking spider right here in your blind spot. You'd go, duh, right? And so that motion of that speed, that's the launch that we now take that kinetic energy and then go, oof, and there's the elbow.
Yeah.
And now suddenly I could be here, fighting Bob. I've got like his knife or his gun here, and he's bending over, and I go, whack, and the shot, and I understand this vertical elbow in a different plane, right? So we get into all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean, I'm the mad scientist, right? So the students in the garage gym, they're not learning how or just how, they're learning why, but they're also learning the neuroscience and the biomechanics.
Yeah. Tony, can you remember what your first, let's call it professional gig was? Like the first time you were hired?
Like corporate,
like not, so not like with the kid with the books at school, but like corporate gig or something.
Yeah, and got paid because I've done a lot of free stuff, and I still do a lot of free stuff.
Who does? Yeah.
Right. Sometimes you do, like, you go and do a sample. It's like a VIP group, and it's going to lead to stuff.
Yeah.
My first unpaid big gig was at a hospital to a department of psychology in the late 80s. I had a student who was I didn't know he was a psychologist, and he was just taking lessons, man. And then one day he says, "Hey, would you come and talk to a group of my colleagues?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, man. Like what is it?" He said, "Oh, it's a bunch of psychologists and psychiatrists. I think they'd be really interested in your fear management." And I go, "Sure, cool, man. Thanks." And I go, like, "I didn't know you were a psychologist." "Yeah, I'm a psychologist." And he worked at the Royal Victoria Hospital, which is a world-renowned hospital in Montreal. Dude, if I tell you, I was so fucking nervous. I'm like 28 years old, and all of a sudden, like, I'm driving there, and then all of a sudden I start to sweat. My heart's racing. I thought I was going to fucking projectile vomit when I got out of the car. I couldn't believe I had said yes to this, because all of my stuff in the 80s was just derived from intuition, talking to victims of violence.
Right.
And I was putting together a system for two reasons. One, as an athlete, I was afraid of everything. So I was using all my students as a guinea pig, going, and that's where that line, you can't, those who manage their fear manage to fight, came out of the 80s. Because I go, I look at that girl in the class, I go, she won't do well. That guy who's a doorman at that shitty club in Montreal, he'll do well. He quits. She fights like a friggin' badger. And I'm like, holy shit. Don't confuse technical with tactical. It's all about heart and indignation and just fighting, with not caring whether you win or lose. Of course, we all want to win, but just fighting. If you don't give yourself permission to fight, there's nothing to talk about.
Heart and indignation?
Yeah, indignation is a special type of anger. Indignation, I always talk about this. Indignation is this type of anger, like I go, "Dwight, you're really pissing me off. Don't get me angry. Damn it, now I'm angry." That's regular anger. Indignation is like what we felt after 9/11. Indignation is like, how dare you? Right? It's like, do you have kids? No? Okay. No. But you've got people in your life you love. You're I don't know if your mom's still alive, mom, sisters, close family members, a niece, a nephew. You might be walking down the street and you're tired and you're getting old and your back's hurting you, and three guys go, "Hey, let's roll this old guy here." And you're like, fuck it. Maybe I'll just let them beat me up. I'm not in the mood, right? And I know you wouldn't do that, but just hypothesize. Because you're like, yeah. But if you were with your niece or your sister or your brother, and again, I don't know your family units, and somebody that you were their protector, you were their big brother, and you went, "Hey, yeah, you can go ahead. I'm just going to put money in the meter." and then you looked up and 3 guys were about to grab your niece, you'd be like, hey, right? And you'd be like, right, like they're like, what are you fucking doing? Like that's indignation. Like where something fucking snaps in you. And I describe it as everyone has like a how dare you trigger.
Right.
And I don't fucking care. How dare you? And that's what we help people connect to in our self-defense courses. It's very, very powerful.
That's excellent.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's excellent. I want to start winding down.
Yep.
And so there's the famous Bruce Lee saying about techniques being simple, direct, and some people say non-classical, some people say simple, direct, and effective. I perceive that was not necessarily taken from Bruce Lee, but that must feature in everything that you've done, everything that you've developed. Simple, direct, and non-classical.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, there's nothing more simple than moving the way that the body's naturally designed to move.
Yeah.
So
I don't understand why JKD people would ever be upset with you then.
I don't know. You'd have to ask them. You know? Listen, it was a different generation. You know, I had on Black Belt posted something of mine a while ago, and I had like 3 guys go, you know, basically saying, "Who is this old fuck?" You know, and it's just people are fucking assholes, and they're assholes online. And the reality, whether you like my stuff or not, respect the fact that I've been teaching longer than most people have been alive.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like I'll get some like 25-year-old guy going, "I never saw you in the octagon," or "I never heard of you." And I go, that doesn't like who are you, man? You know,
exactly. Yeah.
And it's not that I'm some big deal, but the reality is, you know, if you look at my resume before you make a post on something,
right,
just go check out who I work with and who I still work with.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got Department of Defenses from around the world trust me to train elements within their DoD.
Yeah.
Maybe you could learn something from me. You know, and again, I don't teach everything. I teach what I do, and there's a very niche or niche, depending on where you come from.
You're Canadian. You can say niche,
right? You know, can you weather the flinch? Do you understand the neuroscience of learning? Do you understand the neurobiology of fear? And so a lot of the guys that I teach are type A personalities, Dwight. Like the cops or military. I talk about fear, and they're like, you know, they don't. And it's the same with martial artists, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I explained to them, I'm not talking about your willingness to fight. But like Mike Tyson used to cry and throw up before a fight, right? George St. Pierre will say, and this is online, he was always scared before a fight, and the worst day of his life was the day of the fight. People who understand that can turn that vulnerability into strength because they own it. They're not standing around going, I ain't afraid of nobody, right? They're not, there's no facade or illusion, but you can go, and I just help people manage their fear more effectively. That's the whole no fear part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, I mean, you know, when you encounter, I call them the pay-per-view generation, because that's what they grew up with, that kind of technology, you know, social media and pay-per-view. And so,
and be the armchair quarterback for eating popcorn, watching TV, going, you know, fucking kick them. Wow, you go suck, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the funniest ones are the ones that go, oh, well, Bruce Lee doesn't have a fight record, so you know this and this and this. I love coming across them. I do have, so I got one silly question for you.
Go for it. Is it about my shirt?
Well, it is about clothing. Is there a Blauer tactical clothing line?
No, and it's funny. Well, not mine. My cousins in Boston have one of the best and biggest police uniform companies,
right?
And it's Blauer USA, and they do police uniforms, and then a company in Italy did a license for their logo. And I'm walking in Milan a few years ago, and all of a sudden I see a Blauer store, and in there it's like my cousin's logos all over, like really high-end cool shit.
Yeah.
I call them up. I go, dude, I'm like They're like, no, no, no. It's an Italian designer that took the Blauer logo.
Right.
It's for they're the way more successful than me side of the family. I'm the struggling martial arts side.
Well, here was I thinking, man, I go, this Blauer guy, he's such an entrepreneur. That's a perfect match.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To have
We've done a few things over the years because, of course, my number one clients are police.
Mhm.
But in all seriousness, I am a lifelong entrepreneur, and the company does well. Knock on wood. But we work our ass off. I work 7 days a week. My team works their ass off. We got a great, like you said, Jenny's great. All my team's great, and we've got like trainers in almost like all the major countries.
Yeah.
And do stuff all over the world.
All right. So one last question.
Sure.
How do you unwind? How do you, is there ever a time when you can drop all this and just?
So I'm going to show you a picture from today. So I had a meeting at lunch, and then I went to lunch. And then, can you see that?
Yeah.
So I went after lunch. I took my shoes off and went for a 30-minute walk in the ocean surf. I always wanted to live in California. I moved here when I was 50. It was a present to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, if you ask my wife, does Tony unwind? She'd go, I wish. I'm obsessed with what I do.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to turn the camera here and show you guys something.
But that's part of doing it well, Tony.
Well, it's not passion, it's obsession.
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole green section here,
Mm-hmm.
after some active shooters, I wrote out like a whole ASR. If you look at the middle there.
Yeah.
ASR, this is all active shooter. The block beside it over here is all work out with I know you can't see me here, but I'll show you guys something here. But this is not passion, this is obsession. I'll work out with headphones on, listening to books. And this whole panel here, myelinated training, drills that force more specific rep production, signal-based training, close grip and close target, emotional climate training, frequency, specificity, myelinates the neuron. 600% increase if you do this. This is all from studying the neuroscience. If I open up not that one, but if I open up, I run out of space. There's writing on every single one of these except for the first one that I opened. I don't know if you guys can see that in that one, but all over.
Yeah.
And this also goes on in my office, right? Like it's all over. And that stuff's not for anybody but me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's just me. I get ideas and I'm like fucking little, friggin' and breaking it down.
Yeah.
And this is all drills and concepts, and we're always working on that shit.
Yeah.
So I meditate every day. I do breathing exercises every day. I go for walks in nature almost every day. But while I go for a walk, I'll either be listening to some great rock and roll or I'm listening to a book or a podcast. And I let my intuition decide, does my brain need some downtime right now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, listen, man, thanks so much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. It was good to catch up with you.
Of course. I'm glad you reached out, and it was cool. I don't remember how many years ago you had me in Miami.
Yeah. Wow. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And tell Jenny again, I really appreciate everything she did.
I will. And for your audience out there, if you want, we've got that free, the most important stuff I do now is the fear management,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
And
So Jenny sent me all the links. So
Yeah.
I'm going to put all of them into the description.
Okay.
Because I'm going to do what we call the final edit video, and I'll put it up on the YouTube. So I'll make sure that I put all the links that she sent me in there.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to get in the garage gym or have questions, tag me in the stream. I'll try to answer the questions. This is live on your Facebook?
So this is live on Facebook and YouTube right now. And then
Okay,
I'll take the recorded thing, I'll edit some stuff in it, and then I'll add a whole bunch of stuff back into it. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Excellent.
You're in good hands. Jenny told me how to take care of you.
Thank you. I'm a prima donna. I need to be babied. Hey, thank you so much, man. It was an honor to be on the show. And some really good questions, and I appreciate you.
All right, man. Same here. You take care.
Stay safe.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right. That was episode 196 with Tony Blauer. So like I said, I'll put all the contact links and all the informational stuff in the description for the final edit video. And that's it for today. So feel free to share, like, comment. I'll ask Mr. Blauer to go through any questions if necessary. Follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods and on Instagram at Dwight D. Woods. Next Friday, episode number 197 with Sakan Lam of Core Combat in Chiang Mai. So that'll be an international call, and should be at our regular 6 p.m. time. All right. So hopefully I'll see some of you back then next week. And on Wednesdays, of course, there's the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast. If you hang out with me at all on the I Love Jeet Kune page, you'll be aware that we are doing our damn best to move that page towards being a source for Jeet Kune information, Jeet Kune education, and just raising the level of Jeet Kune debate and Jeet Kune discussion into the stratosphere. Right. So until next time, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebels, signing off. You guys have a great weekend. Stay safe. Until the next episode.